Welcome to Lovely English Stories. Thank you for stopping by. Don't forget to share our stories with your friends. This story is perfect for advanced learners. Let's begin. English Story B2 C1 The Cottage. After spending over 2 years traveling the world, Rita felt the desire to settle down, get a stable job, and plant some roots. She loved to explore and wouldn't be giving up on that, but she wanted to have somewhere to finally call home. She'd lived out of a backpack and had shared rooms with strangers, who soon became her friends, for so long that she'd forgotten what it felt like to have some peace and quiet. She craved privacy and her own space to do as she pleased. Rita had managed to save a substantial amount of money in New Zealand. She'd landed a job in a small company that paid decent wages, and so she left with a healthy bank account balance. It wouldn't be quite enough to put a deposit down for a house, but it wouldn't take her long to top up. Before she left New Zealand, she travelled around the main beauty spots on the South Island for 3 weeks. She budgeted and hired a van so she could sleep at free campsites, and so she saved money on pricey accommodation. During this time, she used free Wi-Fi to apply for jobs back home. Rita had experience in a plethora of fields. She has done everything from marketing to care work to teaching English and working in cafes and bars. She was up for anything and liked a challenge. Ideally, she wanted something which paid decent so she could buy her dream home. She had visions of living in a typical British cottage. Rita had made a board on Pinterest which was full of home decor and typical British houses. She wanted an old stone cottage in the heart of a homely village which had a butcher's, a newsagent, a cafe, and of course, a local pub. She wanted her garden to be full of wild flowers and wisteria cascading down the house, just like her Auntie Julie's cottage. She'd look at this board every day and imagine her life in her perfect cottage. She knew these sort of houses were incredibly popular, but she was in the best possible position. She was a first-time buyer, and she had a decent deposit. The only thing she didn't have was a job, but hopefully that wouldn't be the case for too much longer. The day before Rita was due to travel back to the UK, she received an email from a company inviting her for an interview. She'd applied for so many jobs, she couldn't remember which one this was. Her heart sunk a little as she browsed their website. It was a big corporation in London with expansive offices, fancy products, and thousands of staff. She knew some people would jump at the chance to be selected for an interview with this company. She felt a little unappreciative because she really wasn't bothered. With a shrug, she accepted the interview. After all, beggars can't be choosers, and at the moment, Rita had no other options. Rita had always been at her happiest when she worked for smaller companies. Her dream was to work for a charity, or perhaps a small school. She only applied for this job because it paid well and was located just around the corner from where her best mate lived. She thought that if she got the job, she could couch surf at her friend's flat for a while. However, the longer she thought about it, the less appealing it became. She didn't want to sleep on a sofa for months on end, and she definitely didn't want to work in a grey office surrounded by people in suits with egos the size of Big Ben. As Rita boarded her flight home, she set her phone to airplane mode. She had 24 hours before she'd turn it on again. Rita spent the majority of her first flight snoozing and the second eating and watching old films. Luckily, her flights were pretty quiet. No screaming babies or snoring men. She kept thinking about the jobs she'd applied for, but her thoughts were mainly occupied by her dream cottage. She just had to make it a reality. As the plane touched down at Manchester Airport, Rita breathed a sigh of relief. She wasn't a fan of flying and was glad to be back on home soil. The first thing that hit her was the cold. The second thing was how friendly everyone was. And the third was how utterly delighted she was to see her parents when she came out of baggage control. She had planned to stay at her parents' for a few months while she worked out her next steps. It was so good to see them, almost overwhelming. They didn't stop talking on the journey back to their house. On their return, Rita's parents told her some sad news. Her Auntie Julie had passed away. They wanted her to enjoy her last few days of travelling, and so had decided to wait until she was back to tell her. Rita was devastated. She had spent many long summer days in her Auntie Julie's garden. She lived in a beautiful old cottage at the edge of her parents' village. She had lived there with her husband until he passed away 5 years ago. She was an inspirational woman. Before Rita could let the news sink in, her parents had more to tell her. They told Rita how Julie had kept all of the letters and postcards which she sent on her travels. When Julie was younger, she also loved to travel and had lived abroad for many years before settling down close to her sister. Rita's parents told her that Julie had left her house to them in her will, but they had no need for it. They already had a beautiful home. "Oh, please don't sell it yet. I'd love to go back and say goodbye to it," requested Rita. She loved Julie's home. It had such a welcoming vibe. It was a typical thatched roofed cottage with small windows, low ceilings, and masses of character. Visitors to the village would often be seen taking their photo outside the house. It was one of a kind. "Well, the thing is, Rita, we don't want to get rid of it either. We thought perhaps we could turn it into a holiday let or something, or maybe you'd like to have it. It would be part of your inheritance one day anyway." Rita knew she had jet lag, but now she felt like she was completely tripping out. Her parents could sense her dismay and suggested she went to bed and caught up on her sleep. It was strange for her to be back in her childhood room. She was surrounded by her old cuddly toys and posters of boy bands. Rita fell into a dreamless sleep. She woke 8 hours later, feeling confused. She had just finished 2 amazing years of travelling, and now she was faced with the news that her special auntie had passed away. Not only that, she might end up owning her beautiful cottage. It was quite overwhelming. Rita made her way downstairs and devoured a full English breakfast with her parents. Afterwards, her mum presented her with a letter which her Auntie Julie had written for her. It detailed how she thought of Rita as her adoptive daughter and how she wanted her to one day inherit the cottage to which she had such a strong connection. Rita felt unworthy. Surely this is what happens to spoilt rich kids, not a normal lass from a small northern village. She had tried to manifest her dream home, and all this time it was right in front of her. Rita decided to go for a run to shake off her concerns. She ran past her Auntie Julie's cottage. The lawn was a little overgrown, but it looked much the same. Rita decided that if her parents and Auntie Julie really wanted her to take the reins at the cottage, then she would have to do it justice. When she arrived back home, she spoke to her parents about the legalities of owning the house and what she wanted to renovate. Before Rita had gone travelling, her Auntie Julie had distinctly said she wanted an extension to her kitchen. Rita decided she would make this a reality. Of course, before Rita did any of this, she knew she needed to land herself a job. She remembered about her interview at the corporation in London. That simply wouldn't work if she wanted to stay close to her cottage, so she emailed the HR department and politely declined. Rita was back to the drawing board. She needed some time to reassess and figure out her next move. Over the next few days, Rita visited the cottage with her parents. They sorted through all of her Auntie Julie's possessions. It was sad, but it also brought back so many happy memories. There were so many photographs of Rita playing in the garden, cooking in the kitchen, and creating havoc in the living room. She had always loved the cottage. Mixed in with all Auntie Julie's paperwork was her CV. Rita attentively looked through it. She never realized that her auntie had worked for so many charities. Rita decided to Google them and found one that was close to her own heart. She hovered over the vacancies page and thought, if it's good enough for Auntie Julie, it's good enough for me. The charity was based only 20 miles away, meaning that if Rita got a car, she would be within commutable distance. She decided to bypass the website and gave the charity a call. After a lengthy chat, she was invited in for an interview the following day. Everything was happening so fast. Rita could hardly keep up. In just a few days, she had found out her auntie had died. She had inherited her dream home, and now she had a potential job on the cards. She hadn't even fully recovered from her jet lag yet. That night, Rita struggled to get to sleep, so she browsed her Pinterest board again. She looked at the beautiful cottage kitchens, the wildflower gardens, and the weeping willow trees. This was all now starting to come into fruition in her reality. It wasn't just pictures on a screen anymore. Everything felt like it was slotting into place. As she slowly drifted off to sleep, she thought of her Auntie Julie. The next morning, Rita set off for her interview at the charity. Luckily, her dad had put her on his car insurance, so she had some transport. On the way, she stopped by at the cottage and made a promise to herself that if she got the job, She would renovate the cottage with her savings and would make it exactly how her Auntie Julie had envisioned it. The interview was arduous. Not only was Rita's jet lag kicking in, but she couldn't stop thinking about her Auntie Julie. She was struggling to concentrate. However, she needn't have worried. Later that day, the charity called and said that although she didn't have all the experience they were looking for, she had drive and determination, just like her auntie. When Rita hung up the phone, she cried tears of relief. Within a few days of her return, she had secured a job and a new project, the cottage. She couldn't wait to spend long summer evenings on the garden swing, taking in the sounds and smells of her beautiful, wild English garden. She would make her Auntie Julie proud. We hope you enjoyed this lovely English story. Thank you for stopping by. Don't forget to like and subscribe.